What's up, guys? So today, as you can tell from the thumbnail and the title, we are doing another bad film review for The Darkest Minds. Before I play the intro, I will give you guys the critical scores from Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic and IMDb. So we'll start with Rotten Tomatoes. We have 17%. Its audience score was 74%. The Metacritic score was 39%. Its user score was 57%. And so was IMDb's, was 57%. This gives us an all-out average of around about 49%. So it's sitting almost there at that 50% mark. And so, yeah, let's dive straight into my review. Alright, so if you haven't seen one of my film reviews before, basically I take a film, I break it down into 10 different parts, and I give each of those parts a score out of 10 for a total out of 100. And usually and obviously since it's a bad film review, it has to be a bad film critically to qualify. The 10 parts that I break it down into are scripting, casting, acting, directing, cinematography, editing, set design, soundtrack, special and visual effects, and its accuracy to source material, which is the case for this one. Otherwise it would be originality as a new concept, and whether or not the new concept is interesting or not. So we'll dive straight in. We'll start with scripting, which I gave a 7 to. The day that I got this and watched it for the first time, I saw a sort of like a meme on Facebook that was describe your favorite story in 6 words or less, and I got to thinking, what's my favorite story, and then came to a startling conclusion and ended up having my post being teenager fights against corrupted government agency. They were my 6 words, and no one could guess what my story, what my favorite story was, and yet at the same time everyone had a different answer, because not only is it The Darkest Minds, but it's Divergent, it's Hunger Games, it's Maze Runner, it's even in freaking Harry Potter has an element of that young adult plotline where the ministry gets taken over by Voldemort and all of a sudden Harry's fighting against this particular government department. So it's literally the reason the script and sort of the story, I guess, in that sense as well, got a 7 is because it's only above the middle ground because of its like its specifics, its own concept of this disease that causes like superpowers or whatever. So other than that, yeah, it's just pretty basic young adult. You know, it's got the romantic undertone, like the romantic subplot. It's got, you know, a bad guy that tries to present himself as a friend to begin with, and sort of all the usual themes that come with the young adult genre of writing. I mean, I myself am guilty of writing a particular teenage against the government plot line myself. So, and it's just easy when you're writing a young adult novel or any sort of piece of work to do with young adults. It's just sort of the easy one, like, what don't teenagers like? The government. So yeah, a 7 for that one. Casting, however, got an 8. The main character, Ruby, is played by Amanda Stenberg, I think. Got it in one. Who also, not like the last time I saw her, was also in one of the young adult novels that I just mentioned, cinematic adaptation. She was Rue in the Hunger Games. So definitely still out there doing her thing. Excellent performance, obviously. The cast also included Gwendolyn Christie in a sort of smaller role. She played one of the Tracers, one of the bounty hunters. She's from Game of Thrones. She plays Lady Brienne of Tarth. So other than that, I think Mandy Moore, the cast was largely people that I haven't really seen in movies before, so I was able to just sort of enjoy the characters for being characters rather than being like that actress is putting on an excellent role, or like being distracted by where have I seen her before. So, which was a nice change of pace, but sort of the ones that I did know were sort of bigger names to me than I was sort of expecting, considering that I hadn't heard of the book until the movie came out, so it was good. Acting also got an 8, as I said. Some of the performances were really good. Anytime you have a younger actress able to cry on command, it's good, because that's a skill that takes a lot of practice to get down. I myself have been acting now for going on 8 years, so I still can't do that. But yeah, so really good performances. We just had something fall down outside, and it's probably because of the cat. Directing got a 7. Again, fairly average for directing. Being a director myself, there were some things that I would have done a little differently. Certain scenes where I would have tried a different tone maybe, but largely it was still sort of, they didn't make any like massive blunders that I was like, yeah, nah, I wouldn't do that. Just sort of things that I would creatively do different, was all. Cinematography was basic, like with most films. I think the only film that's actually excited me recently with cinematography was Aquaman, but we're not talking about that here. Yeah, there were a couple of shots where it was like, you know, that's a really clever framing, or I like the way they sort of convey particular emotion through camera work alone, but otherwise it was your sort of standard camera work. Editing is the same. There were some parts there, like I like how they had edited the sort of flashback, mind control, erasing bits in. They were really well done, and it allowed you to sort of understand Ruby's sort of emotional story arc as she goes along. Very well done, but again, otherwise still very sort of standard. The set designs were kind of cool. sometimes it was just like, especially when you've got like a dystopian sort of setting, you can actually have a lot of fun with your sets. So like in the mall, or like in the little gas station that they had, there were parts in that where it was like, that's really cleverly designed. Even in the van, the way they sort of had it set up so that you could tell that it was being lived in by kids and not, you know, like there wasn't any sort of adult presence there really. It was really well done. And then you'd get other ones like the camp, for instance, where it was just sort of like, you know, what we want to focus on here is the action and not where it's set. So yeah, some pretty basic stuff, but an 8 nonetheless. Soundtrack got a 7. At this point in doing these film reviews, I think a 7 is just going to be like the bare standard for soundtrack, because for the most part, most movies do this really well, is choosing a composer that's able to make pieces of music that convey a particular emotion for that scene, and yet that is still original to that film. Other than that, on top of that, if a particular song they've used from a particular artist really well conveys a character's attitude or emotion, or sort of is like just like a musical commentary on the situation at large, that's when I'll start stepping it up, and this soundtrack was just a 7. They are good songs on the soundtrack. That's why I'm, you know, not going to go less than a 7, but fairly standard stuff, I think. Visual effects are really cool. I like the way they made the eyes glow. Anytime you have superpowers involved, you know, there's going to be a lot of that sort of thing. Mind control was sort of easy to do because you can sort of have the other actor to do the movements that they're being mind controlled to do. I think the Greens were geniuses, so they just had to read the script and whatever. But when you have pyrokinesis and therefore practical effects with flamethrowers and stuff, electrokinesis with you then going into CG, and telekinesis, which sort of would combine the two of those, practical and like animated effects. It does sort of go into a new area that's always really cool as a filmmaker, to sort of see how they pull those things off. And these powers aren't anything new to general audiences. Everyone's, you know, seen an X-Men movie with Jean Grey in it, or like Amazing Spider-Man 2 had Electro in it, where he was just showing off all these different electrical powers. Like, they're nothing new to people, really. So the way they pulled those off was still kind of cool. And the way they sort of showed the limits of each character as being slightly different, despite being ranked as the same, was also really nice as well. And then its accuracy to the source material. I myself haven't actually read the book, but I read a couple of different synopsises online, and could immediately tell that they rearranged the order of the ranking for some reason, because some of the synopsises said that blues were the ones that you were able, like, that were the safest, and reds were the more dangerous ones, which would, as far as the movie is concerned, mean that geniuses are more dangerous than people with telekinesis, which doesn't make sense, or that they've just swapped those colours around for no reason other than costuming, I'm assuming. So, and that was just like one of the things. There were a couple of other things I can't really think of at the moment that it's sort of, well, obviously creative choices by the director and the producers and the editor even, where they were like, this tells our story better, because that's what it is. It's an adaptation, not a direct, like there's between going from the book to the screen, someone's putting in more creative energy into it, which changes the end result slightly. And so for that it gets a 7. A couple of other notes that I have on this, I didn't find these particularly good or adding anything to it. I didn't find them particularly bad. It was just sort of things that they reminded me of. There is a bit in the film where Ruby has a guard at one of the camps tell her to move along, and it literally felt like they just took the scene from Star Wars, because instead of saying, "We're not the droids you're looking for," she says something like, "You don't feel well," or something, and then finishes it off with, "You want us to move along," or whatever, and the guard literally just says, "Move along," in pretty much the exact same way that the Stormtrooper does in Star Wars New Hope. The costuming for this movie was a note of particular interest to me, because they literally took a note out of the Power Rangers book and was like, she's orange, so let's always just have an element of orange on her, whether that be the jumper she's given by Kate when she's first snuck out of the prison, or the dress that she then wears that the little girl Zoo gives her, or the hoodie that she ends up wearing later on, which is like a paler orange in the center. Liam's always wearing like a blue t-shirt. Chubbs is always wearing his green sweater, and Zoo's got her yellow gloves, so that you know the entire time what colour they are and therefore what power they have, even before you sort of see them exhibit those powers. In the same way that like the Red Ranger's always walking around with a red t-shirt on in Power Rangers. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting, and this is another note just on young adult fiction in general, is that you're always separating teenagers based on a colour that then represents them. Usually blue intends like intelligence, which I think is where the book was going, and the movie was like, we want us to steer clear of that, do our own thing, and in that case I get it. But blue is usually intelligence. For instance, Ravenclaw, erudite, from Harry Potter and Divergent respectively. But yeah, no, you've always got like, you know, here's the blue ones, here's the green ones, here's the yellow ones, and then this had orange and red. Harry Potter has like no orange, and then those 4 colours are the houses. Divergent has, you've got your blue, which is your smart ones, your red, which are your brave ones. They've got their yellow, which is like they're kind people, they're peaceful people or whatever. And then they sort of go into black and white and grey for that particular society. So there's no greens really. And I just sort of want to know what's up with that. Like, is that some backwards way of saying that we should be racially segregating our young people? Because that doesn't fly with anybody. But yeah, I just think it's interesting. Anyway, so if you've been keeping a tally this entire time, you will know that my score that I give to this film is a 74%, which just happens to be the Rotten Tomatoes audience score, and also the highest score out of all of the scores that I gave before my intro. So, yeah. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and until next time, guys. Thanks for watching the video, guys. If you liked that, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're notified when I upload a new video. I upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and share it with your friends as well. And if you want to see more content in between uploads, you can follow my Instagram at Ace of the Arts or my Tumblr at Stories Around a Campfire. And I will see you in the next video.